When I was a teenager, I moved into my father's house in California. I had several paranormal experiences there that I often joke about now, but I firmly believe I was the cause of it all. This is my story, which I've never shared with strangers or people who might have real insight into what happened. My stepmother used to claim her deceased father would mess with things whenever she and my father argued, misplacing items during the night, so my dad would be late for work the next morning. I didn't really buy it and figured she might have been moving things herself. Still, my stepmother and I often discussed ghosts and the paranormal. Our conversations were always open and curious, even though we weren't a religious family. Our house was right next to a cemetery, which only added to the eerie atmosphere. At 16, I loved listening to scary stories on YouTube while painting or doing homework. My stepmother and I talked about Ouija boards, and as an edgy teenager, I decided to buy one. My friends were intrigued, so we planned to use it together. The first time we tried was on Halloween night at the cemetery. We hid behind a large tombstone to avoid being seen, but nothing happened. This only made me more dismissive of the board and its supposed powers. However, the second time we tried it would be my last. My two friends, C and R, and I decided to do a more formal seance. We lit candles, and R and I held the planchette while blindfolded, so C could read the responses. At first, nothing happened, but then the planchette started moving. I assumed my friends were messing with me, so I didn't take it seriously. We asked for a name, and while I can't remember exactly what it was, it sounded like an ancient Hebrew name. After some random responses, we grew bored, said goodbye, and ended the session. Soon after, strange things began happening at home. It started subtly, little things I can't clearly recall, like the feeling of being watched. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and sense a presence in the corner of my room, though it felt more curious than threatening at first. Oddly, I wasn't scared. The energy felt feminine, and I'd just roll over and go back to sleep. But I avoided the guest bathroom at all costs. Something about its bright, sterile lighting made me feel extremely anxious. The activity increased when I fell sick for 2 weeks. I almost never get sick, but this illness hit hard, and the antibiotics I was given caused an allergic reaction, making me even worse. While I was sick, I stayed in the guest room because my parents were using mine. I hated being in that room. It felt like something was watching me, and I was being drained of energy. The dark, oppressive atmosphere was unbearable. I heard voices whispering to me at night, which I chalked up to fever-induced hallucinations. Once I recovered and returned to my own room, I thought I'd escaped the strange energy, but it followed me. The presence in the corner of my room now felt menacing. I began hearing noises behind me, scratching from a wall where no sound should have come from. The anxiety grew, and we even had the house checked for rodents, but nothing was found. I also started feeling as though I was being touched as I passed the guest bathroom, though I convinced myself it was nothing. I drowned out everything by constantly listening to music, fearing that acknowledging it would make it worse. One night, my parents went out for dinner, and I stayed home alone. While feeding our 2 German shepherds, I suddenly heard a woman's voice say, "Hey T," the nickname my family uses for me. Thinking it was my stepmother, I instinctively responded, but then I realized I was home alone. My dogs, who had been beside me, were staring down the hallway where the voice had come from. As if in a horror movie cliche, one of their toys rolled out from behind the kitchen counter. My dogs hadn't moved. In shock, I checked my family's location on Life, 360. They were 20 minutes away, speeding down the freeway. I fed the dogs, tears in my eyes, and hid in my room. The most terrifying incident happened after I had smoked some weed, something I rarely did at the time. I was relaxed, wandering around my room naked after a shower, when I accidentally dropped a bowl of sewing pins. As I bent down to pick them up, I suddenly felt the walls closing in and heard whispers from all around me. My vision blurred, and a deep, guttural growl came from behind me. Every hair on my body stood on end, and I dove into my bed, hiding under the covers like a frightened child. I eventually called my best friend, who helped me calm down. After that, the major events stopped. I would still occasionally hear a woman's voice, or the kitchen sink would turn on by itself, but nothing truly frightening happened again. When we moved to a new state, the activity ceased completely. My stepmother even threw out the Ouija board during the move, ensuring it didn't follow us. Looking back, I feel like playing with the Ouija board opened up a door I wasn't prepared to deal with. Was it all in my head, fueled by teenage anxiety and family stress? Or did I really make contact with something beyond the veil that night? I may never know. This is a story my dad has told me a few times over the years, and with Halloween coming up, it's been on my mind again. Though I've never seen the house myself, the way he and his friends describe it, more than 20 years later, paints a vivid mental picture. To start, my dad is a deeply religious man, a preacher's son who doesn't believe in ghosts or anything paranormal. He's never been easily spooked, but this story shakes him every time he mentions it. Even now, he insists that what he felt that night was something unnatural, and it still scares him to this day. Back in the late 80s, my dad and a few friends often hiked through the woods behind our farm, following trails that led to a frontage road by the interstate. One night, they decided to take a different route that led them around the back of another farm, mostly to check out the owner's exotic animals. After leaving that area and heading deeper into the woods, they stumbled upon what they describe as a Blair Witch-like house, an old, decrepit structure that gave them all an ominous feeling just looking at it. Naturally, they felt compelled to go inside. The house seemed to be from the 1940s or 50s, with vintage decor, but inside, the walls were covered in strange symbols, some in what looked like Latin and others in English, describing satanic rituals. Some of the writing appeared to be in blood, while others were clearly spray painted. My dad, having been a firefighter and having seen his fair share of blood at accident scenes, swears some of it was real. The layout of the house was unsettling. Past the living area was a narrow staircase that forced them to brush against the walls as they ascended. At the top was a large attic-like room with manacles hanging from the walls, dried bloodstains, and even more disturbing symbols. As they were looking around, they heard footsteps coming up the stairs behind them. Quick, heavy steps, like heels clacking on wood. But when they checked, no one was there. They panicked, rushing downstairs, but found no footprints other than their own in the dust. What's even stranger is what happened when they tried to leave. Despite using a compass and their knowledge of the area, they kept ending up back at the front of the house, no matter which direction they walked. They tried this several times, yet each time they found themselves at the same spot. The final time they tried to leave, one of the men became ill, almost fainting. As they were about to give up, one of them pointed toward the attic window. There, they all saw a hunched female figure with dark eyes, watching them. When it moved, they bolted, running through the woods until they emerged by the interstate, miles from where they had started. When they finally made it back to my dad's house, one of them swore he saw the same figure standing at the edge of the woods near the kitchen window. Nothing more ever came of the experience, but it left all of them deeply unsettled. 5 years later, they returned to the site to find the house had collapsed into a pile of rubble. I always used to joke with my dad about going back to find the house still standing, but seeing how rattled he and his friends get when they talk about it, I'm not so sure anymore. What do you think? Could they have just been spooked into seeing things? Or was there something truly unnatural in those woods? On Halloween night, when I was around 11 or 12, I stayed up late playing on my Switch with my headphones in. It was at least midnight when I decided to get some water from our outside fridge, which was in the garage. I should mention that my parents had friends sleeping in a trailer outside, so the door to the garage was left unlocked in case they needed to come inside during the night for any reason. I grabbed my Switch and headphones, heading for the garage. Just before I reached the door, something made me stop. I decided to turn off my Switch and take off my headphones, which was unusual for me at that age. I had no reason to do it, but in hindsight, it might be why I'm still here today. As soon as I placed my hand on the garage door handle, now with my ears free, I heard a loud crash coming from inside the garage. My body went cold. It felt like my whole body was buzzing with static, but I didn't freeze. I calmly turned the door handle slowly, trying not to make any noise. When I realized it was unlocked, I quickly locked it. The moment I did, the handle began to turn and rattled rapidly, 4 times. I ran straight to my parents' room and knocked loudly enough to wake them both. They asked what was wrong through the door, and I frantically said, "Please tell me one of you is in the garage." My dad responded, "No." And after I explained what had just happened, he said it was probably one of their friends wanting to come inside. He told me to unlock the door. Believing them, I cautiously went outside, but not without grabbing a kitchen knife. I'd watched enough horror movies to be careful. However, the next morning, my parents asked their friends if it had been them. Not only did they confirm that none of them had left the trailer that night, but they also mentioned that they'd heard someone trip and mutter, "Fuck," under their breath outside. I had effectively scared off an intruder. That garage door is now always locked at night.